Critical Blast, where pop culture gets blasted.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com. Now, for years, people have been out in the wilds of North America looking for the creature known as Sasquatch, or as some of us call him, Bigfoot. But every time we look, he's either off in fuzzy areas or he's out to the side. He's in an indistinct area. We just can't get good footage of him. So we're going to try in other countries. And that is sort of the subject of what Darcy Weir's movie is, Sasquatch Among Wildmen, because apparently the Bigfoot doesn't just exist in America. Maybe someday we'll see him. I don't know. But maybe someday Darcy might see him. And Darcy, here he is now. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you doing, RJ? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming on. I don't know who that was.
So I guess some kind of pygmy Sasquatch you got going on there.
Apparently. So Sasquatch Among the Wildmen. There, now we can actually see it. How long have you been a Bigfoot, not necessarily fanatic, I guess, but having an interest in it? Because you'd have to have an interest to run this kind of a documentary, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I wasn't always a believer or even interested at all. I was probably just like you or anybody else watching the show, mostly a skeptic. In 2015, I was invited to a weekend trip to stay in a native Canadian reserve area of British Columbia, Canada. And there's a festival that happens there every year. It's called Sasquatch Days. And actually the indigenous folks that live in this area of British Columbia, the Sasquatch, which is the word that originally was what Sasquatch came from, they have the Sasquatch in their totem pole. So they believe quite fervently in this creature's existence, and they've passed on, through oral tradition, the story of its existence through the ages. But I went on this trip. I was with a friend at the time, and they had no interest. They were actually working in the travel industry and were given a familiar to get to know this area. They were allowed to come for free and all that stuff. So they brought me, and when I came, I said, I want to go talk to the Sasquatch guys. That's part of your itinerary. These like Sasquatch or Bigfoot hunters. And I sat down with them and I brought my camera. And really, that is how I filmed my first documentary in this whole sort of research field. That documentary was called The Unwanted Sasquatch. And it starts off in a place called Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia. And that's pretty much where I started to follow what was going on in this field. And you've seen the documentary, yes, RJ?
Yes, I have.
So pretty much the main subject of my documentary that offers a backbone to the whole story of this cryptid or this relic hominid, which we like to call it, is Jeff Meldrum, Dr. Jeff Meldrum out of Idaho State University. He was kind enough to be a subject in my first documentary. So I started filming my first documentary in Canada, and then I did my research, and I said, I got to go talk to this guy, Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum out of Idaho State University, because he apparently has the best collection of data. And, that includes footprints, handprints, hair samples, you name it, from any encounter.
I might be misremembering this, but I think Dr. Meldrum might even be the one who has a casting of a hindquarters from a nesting and a mudslide where they found that where it was sleeping at one point.
That's right. It's called the Skookum Cast. And they baited apparently a Bigfoot in order to get that cast, and it sort of laid down to grab the bait from what I recall. Anyways, so yeah, Jeffrey Meldrum is pretty much the penultimate when it comes to this research field. I guess he would be the ultimate at this point. The penultimate was him before it was Grover Kranz, and Grover Kranz is now passed. Let's say it's all him. Pretty much he is where you go to find out the best information in regards to the evidence. And when I was out there the first time filming for my first documentary, we were chatting, and I was looking around his lab, and he had this pamphlet, and I picked up this pamphlet, and it said field guide for Wildmen, relic hominids that may exist in the wilderness. And he said, oh yeah, I just printed that. I'm thinking of printing quite a few more. If you want, you can have it. And I said, this is really cool. This basically is telling me that there's sightings of something like Bigfoot in Poland and Ukraine and part of Eastern Europe, and there's a Russian version of Bigfoot, and there's a Chinese version of Bigfoot. Like, is this for real? And he's like, through the historical record, as far as I know, there's people that have written books over there and have documented and taken plaster casts of their encounters in all these different cities and remote towns in parts of Eastern Europe and Russia and Asia and you name it. So it's not just.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, we have all different kinds of bears all over the world. We have different kinds of primates in different areas of the world. Why not different variations on the Sasquatch or the Yeti or whatever the overarching classification is of this particular hominid?
Yeah, that's right. And you made a really good point there about bears. Everybody sort of takes for granted that bears are a North American creature, right, that originated from North America. But actually, if you look at where they truly came from, it was from Asia, from the Russia, the part of the when the Bering Land Bridge, which was an ice bridge, connected Southeast Asia and Russia, that massive continental divide, to North America, to like Alaska and northern Canada, let's say, that's when there was a great migration of all kinds of animals. And, if you look at Russia, they have the same sort of bears as we do. China has the sun bear. And those bears are relatives to the bears we have in North America. We hypothesize that the Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, which is the same creature, it's just two different names and origins. One is from native Canadian tribes, and the other one is from, in the United States in 1952. Some train workers, some railroad workers found these large prints when they were building this railroad in Northern California. And when they saw the prints, it got published in the newspaper, and they said Big Foot, and then in parentheses it said Big Feet, and Bigfoot stuck ever since. But yeah, it's the same creature, and we hypothesize that they may have relatives in other parts of the world.
Why not? I mean, like I said, there's just variations all over the place of the same different species spread around the world, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Bap2 is in the chat here. He mentioned that there's a group of Buddhists who have a Yeti hand enshrined in their temple. Now, Sasquatch Among the Wildmen, you went over to Asia and you did a lot of filming over there. Was this on your itinerary at any point to go see that, or did you know about that?
I know about that. I know that in the Himalayas, there's a Buddhist temple that even has a skull cap. It has like the crest of what supposedly is a remnant skull fragment from a Yeti. And it basically looks like a cone head with tons of like red and brown hair on it. And in our documentary, we show a photo of that when we're talking about the Yeti. We reference that. So we show the hand, which is in the shot because it's pretty famous. And we show the cap, the skull cap that's still in existence. And if I'm not mistaken, they have taken samples of that skull and done some DNA testing, and they link it to a unknown primate. So
yeah. That's the same thing I've heard and read. There's so much. I was joking at the opening of the film about how there's so much grainy kind of film out there for Bigfoot. He's always in a mist or he's out of focus. But these days, I mean, we've all got one of these now, and they're high def and they're multi-million pixels in them. How soon do you think it is before somebody actually gets, like, this is the shot? It's going to be the next Patterson-Gimlin because it's going to be so clear.
So, I think when people talk about their cell phones and they compare the video or photo quality of those to what you can get on a DSLR with a telephoto lens, I think people are kind of mistaken as to how these encounters usually go down. From what I gather, it's not like something that happens usually in daytime. It's said that these things are mostly nocturnal. And it's been reported also that they have eye shine.
Yes.
So, and the human eye can't do that. But that just proves that if you have that biological enhancement to your eyes, then for night vision, then it's most likely you're a creature that's going to be active during night. And, the most famous video footage that's ever come about is the Patterson-Gimlin film. And that was a daytime film shot on 8mm. And that footage has been cleaned up and, overanalyzed a million times. I think that's the best. That's the smoking gun. I feature that in my first documentary, the Unwanted Sasquatch, which I'm re-releasing as a director's cut with extra footage and all that stuff in January next year. But that's really the best footage. You see female anatomy on Patty, is what they nicknamed her. You see muscle definition. You see hair, like all this stuff that in 1967, we really just did not have the technology to fake that. Chewbacca came out in 1976.
Yeah.
Or in and around there. And he looks like kind of puppeteerish, right? He's like, and all that stuff. So I think that's the best footage. I think cell phones may have a chance of getting good footage of a Bigfoot or Sasquatch or some other relic hominid in other places of the world. But you have to keep in mind that most of the time people aren't seeing these things during the day. So if they do get it at night, your cell phone usually doesn't have very good night video capability. And
Right.
Second of all, these things like to keep their distance. I have not heard of an encounter where they're like within 5 feet. It's usually like 30 feet, 20 feet, or way more. That's why we have these videos where we see something climbing a mountain in the distance, and people are like, oh, that doesn't look like a man, and it's yada, yada, yada. It's too grainy. It's far away. That's fair. But if this is a creature that does not want to interact with us because, historically, human beings are pretty violent creatures, maybe they're just trying to get away most of the time they see us or we come into their presence. And your cell phone doesn't really have that, a cell phone is good for this type of video, for the type of distance we're in right now. That's why everybody has a really good selfie picture. It's not very good for telephoto, but maybe with one of these new iPhones and they have really good telephoto camera lenses on them, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, the telephoto on them, it sucks. I mean, the moon was gigantic on Halloween night, and I go out there with my phone to take a picture of it, and to me, the moon looks like this, and on my cell phone, I'm like, there's a star in the sky. I don't know why it does that, but as for the Patterson-Gimlin film being some of the best footage, or the best footage, I think you're underrating some of the footage that's in Sasquatch Among Wildmen, because you have this amazingly clear shot with this Asian family with their little boy, and they're watching from this creature from the back. It's squatted down and it's eating, and then it gets up and walks away. Can you talk a little bit about that footage that was acquired?
I think you're talking about actually the skunk ape video. I don't think that was
Florida, because they were speaking Chinese.
Florida, not Florida, Chinese.
Yeah, that was the Chinese family that was taking the picture, and I couldn't understand them because they were speaking to each other in Chinese.
I think, well, the Chinese portion of the documentary is predominantly animated stuff. And that was part of an expose that came from a newspaper, Southern China Post. But the Yeren, just to give a bit of background on that, it's said to be 7 to 8 feet tall, which is right around the height that most people commonly describe a Sasquatch being. Some have described them 10 feet tall or even bigger. But the interesting thing about the Yeren is that the foot pathology, the feet, and the way that they seem to move, that we can tell from all the casts from certain encounters, it's exactly like a Bigfoot or Sasquatch casting, or like a track that's been casted. Meaning it seems to have prehension, kind of like a gorilla or a chimpanzee foot.
Right.
It's different. Obviously, it's longer and more human-like, but it also seems to be quite long and quite wide. Like, some have been reported to be 8 inches wide, which is pretty big.
That's a big foot.
Yeah, it's a big foot. So pretty much that was where we analyzed the Yeren the most, in terms of comparing the evidence of their feet and with all the evidence that we've collected in North America. On top of that, we also talked about the hair. I don't know if you saw a portion of the documentary where we examine the Olympic project and what these guys found in the Seattle rainforest in Washington state.
I do remember them sending hair off for DNA analysis.
Yes. So they found that hair in what seems to be nest structures, nests that were woven into the deep wilderness of the Olympic National Park in Washington state. And there's also been hair samples that are kind of reddish in color found in what they suppose are Yeren nests in northern China. So the Shenanjia National Forest. So it's interesting that when you look at primates, one primate that seems to always make a nest is a gorilla. Every night they make a nest. They weave it together. They try to make something comfortable for them to sleep on every night. Just like a human wants to have comfort in their sleep, right?
Sure.
And with the Yeren, there was a tracker in China that found a group of nests. And now in Washington State, without these men even knowing that there's been a study in China about this, they had found these massive huckleberry bush woven nests, 5 to 6, built in sort of a formation so that anybody who's any being that's sleeping in these nests has eyesight of the other nests, which is kind of cool. Means that there was an intelligent setup or design to this sort of community that they stumbled upon.
Now, in the gorilla community, when they do these nests, are they not permanent nests? Are they not like, hey, I slept here last night, I'm going to sleep here again tonight? Because I'm just wondering, if you find a nest structure like that, why you wouldn't immediately put up trail cams and monitor this thing for the next several weeks.
Yeah, so the interesting thing with that is that the trail cams can be set up, but this area that they actually found the nests, it's a logging area in Washington. So it was actually found by a tree feller, a guy that goes through with a big industrial sort of crane machine and just chops down trees, sucks in those trees, and then they kind of start getting put into a pile to be carried off to a refinery or, a mill. And this guy had been a tree feller, had been doing this type of work for over 20 years. And when he stumbled upon them, he was actually kind of scared because he'd never really seen anything like this. And this is in a very wilderness area, untouched by human beings. By the time the researchers, Shane Corson, Derek Randalls, and these other guys had made their journey out to this area and done their research, they had already cut down a lot of that evidence that the original logger had seen. But there was still 5 or 6 of them left. So that was good. And they did an analysis with Jeffrey Meldrum, actually. Dr. Meldrum traveled out there because it was a very unique find. They took core samples from the middle of the nest to see if they could find any interesting DNA that was laid there from whatever was sleeping on it. And, your question in regards to the gorillas and how they nest, they usually will nest once a night in a unique nest. They can come back and use parts of an old nest, but they like to form their nest new every night. It's just an activity that they enjoy, I guess.
Yeah, you got to make the bed, straighten the sheets up. You don't want to sleep on wrinkles. Come on. So when you say there were 5 or 6 left, how many nests were there originally reported before they were all destroyed?
I don't know.
Noticed that something was weird. I mean, he probably didn't know, hey, these are 8 nests. He just said there's a lot of circles on the ground.
Yeah, and they even were off the ground quite a bit. Kind of picture, let's say you walked upon a bush that's about like 4 feet off the ground. And then all of a sudden you saw that the bush had been like orchestrated or formed in a way that people had taken sticks and like created a large bird's nest sort of looking thing out of the existing bush. That's pretty much what they came upon. which was very different. Huckleberry bushes can grow, up to 15 feet, maybe higher. And they seem to take these large huckleberry sticks, break them off, even at heights that most people couldn't reach, like 8 feet, break them off, and then they'd start weaving those branches into these bushes that are a little bit closer to the ground, which would allow for some buoyancy, also for whoever's sleeping in it to retain their body heat so that the cold ground can't suck the heat out of your body. So intelligently designed, and tree fellers and all these people that work in the outdoors, they've seen a lot of different types of things. And I'm sure when they come across something that looks man-made, they would immediately be like, oh, okay, this looks like a makeshift campground, right?
Right.
But this looked very different. And when the researchers from the Olympic Project got wind of it, they wanted to go check it out right away.
So is there anything that you've seen yourself when you've gone to do your first documentary, or when you were doing Sasquatch Among the Wildmen? And I'm not saying, were you out one night and, something crossed your path, but, you hear a lot of stories. Is there anything evidence-wise you've seen that you've looked at and said, okay, yeah, this is, proof to me, incontrovertible, that there's something else that's out here?
So I have not personally been to a Sasquatch expedition, so to speak. I did go out with Thomas Steenberg and Bill Miller. They gave me a tour of a northern part of Harrison Hot Springs that's quite in the wilderness when I was first making that other documentary. And that was pretty much the most I had done. That was during the day. It wasn't a camping trip, nothing like that. What really made me shocked and kind of start to believe that there's something more to this was the first foot cast that I got my hands on. It was actually a foot cast that was from the famous Patterson-Gimlin film. And it was 2 tracks that I was looking at. And in both the casts, you can see, when you get your fingerprints, when you go to the police station, hopefully you haven't been, RJ, but let's say you
had a clearance one time. I had to get fingerprinted for that.
Okay. So when you get your fingerprints, you can see the clear definition in your fingers, all these little lines.
Yeah, the whorls.
Right. And as you get to the edge of your fingers, that is your unique, that is what makes you unique, your ridges to your skin. It's
right.
called the Dermal Ridge. And if you ever get a chance to go to one of these conferences where they present evidence tracks from recent sightings or even old sightings, the best tracks have what appears to be dermal ridges on the toes, the sides of the feet, the pads of the feet, around the back ball and the front ball. You can see evidence that there's a skin, and the skin has a print to it that is leaving definition in the mud, which is then picked up by the plaster. And that is what made me say, wow, you're not really going to fake that. If you're going to take a stomper, which is a big wooden foot or a rubber foot or something, it usually doesn't have that definition. It doesn't have that kind of detail. And these real tracks have that detail. And, if you listen to Dr. Jeff Meldrum, he will explain to you that the best tracks that are out there are the smoking gun, because they also show anatomy and foot in motion. So they show that a real working foot of a very large non-human creature that has a similar foot to us, but not the same, is leaving this evidence.
Now, I want to emphasize to the viewers that Sasquatch Among Wildmen is a serious look at the cryptid phenomenon and the search for this creature, because for the past handful of years, television-wise, we've been inundated with people wandering the woods and banging on trees. You've got shows like the Mountain Monsters, where it went from 18 different kinds of Bigfoot living in Kentucky, and they all have histories. Do these shows do they hurt the research through some of their over the topness or some of their repetitive non-conclusiveness?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of these shows are part of a formulaic reality TV production that you see all the time. If you look at, I hope you don't, at least I don't. It's not my interest, but if you look at the Kardashians, that is a reality TV example. And these Bigfoot shows that are made in a reality TV formula, they use the same hallmarks. They create a bit of drama, they create a bit of spectacle, and they have an expert speak, they have a skeptic speak. They don't really look into the evidence that deeply, and there's a lot of comedy mixed in. And usually what you're doing when you watch that show is you're putting focus on the people that are investigating it. It's the people that you're watching. It's the people that you're idolizing and becoming familiar with and growing to like. And they have their ups and downs, and it's kind of like a comedic drama that you're watching. With the documentaries that I like to create, I like to talk to people that are not trying to put on some kind of dramatic comedic show. These are honest folks that literally have come across something that is very out of the ordinary, something that by normal scientific terms should not exist. Kind of like UFOs, they're not supposed to exist, but thousands of people every year through the ages have reported these things to exist. And, now the Pentagon has released some videos and said they're not ours. So maybe
we've got aircraft that were not made on Earth. They've said it.
So there's a very good chance that one of these days, I hope, if television is going to be a place that this type of data is going to be presented more, I hope that a producer like myself gets involved with it and makes a series that tells a serious story, that presents the data, the way that it was found, the way that it was analyzed, and it's not focused on creating some kind of formulaic reality TV joke.
Yeah, I know that sometimes they'll get a dramatic advertisement for an upcoming episode, and my wife's like, "Ooh, they might have something tonight." I'm like, I have to trust that this was shot a year ago. If they found a Bigfoot a year ago, there's nobody in the world that could have kept that secret until tonight's episode of the Moneymaker crew out there doing their thing. But you bring up an interesting point, kind of tangentially about the same thing with UFOs. That people see them now, the government's admitted to them. There's a contingent of folks who tie the two things together: the Bigfoot sightings and the UFO sightings. And this goes all the way back to the legend of Boggy Creek, and fictionally the $6 Million Man was a UFO and a Bigfoot story all together in that particular episode. But you do hear stories of there were lights in the sky, and at the same time somebody sees a hominid, a Bigfoot-like hominid. Does any of that? Did you hear any stories of when you were researching for this latest documentary?
I'll be honest. I've been approach to tell that sort of side of the story, but I've stayed away from it. And unfortunately, I don't find there's much credibility to those stories. I'm sure I haven't seen all of the information, and I haven't been told all the information, so I can't make 100% judgment about that yet. But, you know, for example, in my first documentary in The Unwanted Sasquatch, Bill Merrill quite famously told the world that the Sasquatch was a time dimensional portal jumping creature that could phase in and out of reality. And famously on a TV show called Town Hall, you know, they had him and they had all the normal encounters with Bigfoot people, you know, hunters and stuff who usually come across them in deep wilderness while they're game hunting. They had the skeptics in the audience, and they also had, you know, Grover Krantz, who was like the original Jeffrey Meldrum. And most of the people were kind of laughing or shaking their heads when this guy's telling that story. And I don't want that to be how people react when you bring up Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I'd like people to watch documentaries like mine and realize that there's credible evidence out there to some of the most incredible encounters people have had. And those encounters seem physical. They don't seem paranormal or like from a spiritual sort of aspect, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
not to knock that at all, but it just doesn't connect with me.
I think it's far more credible that we can say there's a species of animal out there that we think is out there, and we've seen evidence. We just haven't caught one yet, because we're discovering new species of animal all over the world every year. Granted, some of them are very, very small. Some of them are, you know, in the water where we haven't explored our oceans very much. But it's more within the realm of possibility that there's a very shy creature that lives in the deep woods that sometimes gets lost when it's migrating near the edges and has to find its way back in, and some people see it. Than it is to say that, you know, they're beaming down or phasing in from Dimension X or whatever like that. That's not going to get anybody any serious consideration if you start telling that story.
So I don't want to act like every single encounter or story that's been told out there is fake or real. There's a bit of both. And we even talk about that in this documentary. You know, we talk about a hoaxer, and there are hoaxes out there. There's definitely going to be lots of people that like to go to something that is getting attention, and they want to draw that attention to themselves.
Yeah.
And I kind of tend to think of folks like Bill Merrill, who, you know, say that they're, you know, they can speak to ghosts and Sasquatch at the same time. Sasquatch is some kind of telepathic alien dimensional creature or something. I think that type of story is usually from somebody who's saying, hey, look at me, look at me.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's stick with the biology and leave the science fiction aspects of it for another day out there. So right now, I see that Sasquatch Among Wildmen is available on DVD already. Is that correct? I mean, I've linked to it, so I know it's out there on Amazon. But was it supposed to be streaming right now as well?
Apparently, the streaming it's going to be live on quite a few different services. I can tell you where you can reach it. Let me see here. Can I? Yeah, it is going to be on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, Xbox, Vudu, Fandango Now, DirecTV, Dish Network, Comcast, Xfinity, Spectrum, Cox, Verizon, Fios. Yeah, all that on November 10th. And if you want a hard copy of it, you can order it now. It should be delivered by next Tuesday, which is November 10th.
Absolutely. And we have the link to that Amazon DVD hard copy right down there in the description below this video, folks. So if you want to click on that and have your own copy of it, you won't regret this one. This one is a very interesting one. I went into it with trepidation because I've seen so many of them already. I mean, we've got a large collection. But this one was different because it was not the same people I'd seen before all the time. It was new locations, new footage of different things, different kinds of Sasquatch being talked about, the Yeren and these others in Russia and Asia. And then, there's still North American stuff. Is this your last documentary that you can see yourself doing on Sasquatch, or is there another chapter that you're going to delve into later on?
Yeah, I plan to tell one more story, and I have a bunch of footage shot. I have the story in my head. I just haven't really put it down on paper yet. But yeah, it's going to be something also unique and different to what's out there. So yeah, definitely look out for that. But that's probably a year away or something like that at least. I have made some documentaries on the UFO topic. If you want to check out one that's free on Tubi TV, just go to tubitv.com and search Being Taken. It's one on the abduction phenomenon. And I made a couple other documentaries in that series. They're all part of a series called Beyond the Spectrum. Pretty out there stuff. But in January of this year, there will be the director's cut of the original Sasquatch film coming out, plus 2 new UFO documentaries that I've been working on for the past 2 years. So yeah, looking forward to getting some thoughts on those and having a discussion about that. Maybe I can come back on sometime, RJ.
I would love that. I used to be this, years ago when I was a teenager, and Sasquatches lived next door because it was prehistoric times, obviously. But I was huge into the UFO phenomenon. The Betty and Barney Hill story that was made into a telemovie at that time. Close Encounters of the Third Kind was the big movie at the time. So that's always been an interest of mine.
And actually, the documentary I just mentioned, Being Taken, we cover Betty and Barney Hill in detail. We cover Travis Walton. We cover the incident that happened in Africa, which is escaping me, where it was daytime mass sighting. All these students saw a craft land and there were beings and such. We cover it's the Areola School. Yeah, we cover pretty much what thousands of people have claimed has happened to them, and the UFO subject in general. So yeah, maybe you'd be interested in checking that one out.
Absolutely. Let's as that one comes to fruition and gets out there, let's set up a date and discuss that one, because I could go on for a couple hours talking about that one.
That one's out. Being Taken is out.
Okay, well, then I will get a hold of your PR folk who set this up, and we'll get that one worked out, and we'll have you back on soon.
Cool.
All right, folks, you've been talking with Darcy Weir, who's the director of Sasquatch Among Wildmen. We encourage you to click the link, go out to Amazon, and get the DVD. But if you're trepidatious about that, he just listed off, 11 different places where you can find it streaming. It's out there to be found. It's easier to find than Sasquatch is. Trust me, if you just go look, you'll find him. And Darcy, we appreciate you being on tonight. It's been a pleasure talking with you. We thank everybody in our chat for showing up and contributing their thoughts. And with that, we're going to go ahead and knock off for tonight. We want to invite you to come back tomorrow when we will have the director and cast of They Reach. We will have our own horror reviewer, Damascus Minsmeyer, who will be co-hosting with that when we talk to Silas Dahl, Mary Madeline Rowe, Eden Campbell, and James Winters. And then, of course, this Saturday evening coming up will be the voting edition of the LCS Guide, when we talk with our local comic shop owners about what's going on in the comic industry these days and how they're surviving. And we will have Bleeding Fools publisher Chris Braley as our co-host on that one. Darcy, best of luck with this documentary, and we look forward to seeing Being Taken very quickly here.
Thank you, RJ. It's been great.
Good night.
Take care.